In this video, I will talk about what documents are needed to complete a residential lease or rental file. And we'll start with the required document checklist, which is what we're looking at here. And then we'll look at each document that is on this checklist. Now, you'll notice that this is it. This is our entire checklist that we use internally here for our required documents. It's less than a full page. And the reason is I go through each document, I make sure we have whatever is required and up to date, but nothing superfluous or additional, because there's already a large documentation requirement for California transactions. There's a lot of paperwork. And so what I do is whittle it down to what's necessary and essential and nothing more. And as long as you have all of these documents in your file and they're properly executed and complete, then you won't have any issue. Any high volume brokerage is going to have files requested by the Department of Real Estate. And we've had to submit files several times over the years. It's a matter of doing volume. And eventually you'll have a request, and we've never had an issue with our files because we're very good about having complete and organized real estate files. And I think that's extremely important in terms of being a compliant agent or broker. So let's jump right into it. We'll look at what we have here. Now, I have as the first line twice agency relationship disclosure. And this is the same form you see in a purchase agreement. It's 2 pages. It's required by state law. And whether you're representing the landlord or the tenant, you're going to have this form completed. And this is just where your client's going to sign on the first page. So are you. And there's nothing to do on the second page. And it's written twice, of course, depending on your relationship to your client. Now we have the lease rental application, and we put this as optional if an application was used, because there's sometimes it's not used. Now, CAR has an application, and it's the form LRA. And this is the application that CAR has for us in case we need it. But we don't require this because sometimes applications are done differently, or they're used through some sort of software, and there might be a special arrangement. So if there is, don't worry about it. You don't need to use this form. But we have it on here as optional because sometimes agents ask us if there's an application, a lease application form. Lease listing agreement, that's CAR form LL if you're the listing agent. And that, of course, is just like a residential listing agreement for a property you intend to sell as a listing agent. It's the same thing here. Now, keep in mind, I'll just make one quick note. I'm not going to go through this whole form, but when you charge a commission, make sure to put the entire gross amount. So we have a number here. Put the entire, let's say it's 5%. And I'll throw this out because this is a question I get asked very often. Sometimes there's a flat fee, and the flat fee can be written in here, or there's a percentage, and usually a percentage is, let's say, 5% of the first year lease, or 5% of the total lease period, and then half of that is shared with the tenant's agent. All this is addressed here very easily. It'll take you less than 30 seconds to read this section, and you'll know exactly what to do, whether or not you're charging a percentage or a flat fee. But if you're charging a percentage, it's usually the same as what you see in a sale, which is 5%, and then half of that's shared with the buyer's agent. Now, of course, there might be a flat fee. Sometimes it's $1,500, and maybe $750 is shared to the tenant's agent. Either way, this is where you put it. So here it is, the lease listing agreement, CAR form LL. Let's jump back here. Now, of course, we have the lease agreement itself, and that is the CAR form LR, and that is right here. And we have a whole separate video you can see on how to complete this form, but I'm just showing you for the sake of going through our checklist. Now, there's a lead-based paint disclosure. And this is for properties that were built in 1978 or before. Now, sometimes agents add this just for good measure, and I think that's fine. This used to be called car form FLD. Now it's LPD. But this is the lead form for pre-1978 homes. And even if you throw it in on newer homes, it's fine. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Pretty straightforward. Now, I should say, I'm going to jump back here into the lease agreement itself, because many of these other documents are already bundled with the lease agreement. So let's jump back in here. So the lease agreement, I'm looking at this PDF. It's 18 pages long, which is just mind-boggling for a lease agreement. That's extremely long. Part of the reason that it's so long is because we come down here and we have the bed bug disclosure is included, and you'll see we have bed bug here. And then jump back here. We have the tenant flood hazard disclosure, which is also required. We have rent cap and just cause addendum. That's not a separate required document. I don't even mention that because this is an integral part of the lease agreement. It's already built in, so it's on there. Fair housing and discrimination, already built into this form. Now, this is interesting because at the beginning of this year, this became a requirement that agents furnish to the tenant a booklet. And this booklet is about dampness and mold. And it's 4 pages, I believe. And you can find it separately on a website if you do a web search for that. But here it is conveniently bundled into this lease agreement. And then we have so you can see that what we just went through here, with the exception of a couple things, and I'll get to them in a second, is already built into the lease agreement. We also need a LRM. This is the lease mold and ventilation addendum. We also need a water heater and smoke detector statement of compliance. This is very important and required by law. We need a carbon monoxide detector notice. Again, very important and required by law. And that's what we just looked at right here. We need a copy of the MLS printout. Listing agents, have your seller sign the MLS. I promise you that will save headaches. The seller should acknowledge that they've received a copy and that they acknowledge and have verified the information on the MLS. That way they can't come back to you and say that you misrepresented the property, even if it's just a fair accident on your part. And then deliver booklet on dampness and mold. That's just making sure that it's done in case sometimes agents parse out these forms and they'll split the advisories and disclosures built in with the lease agreement. If that happens, you need to make sure that you have everything built in here when you put the file together. And part of that is the booklet on dampness and mold. And that is what we saw here at the very end. And you can just do a web search if you want. I mean, you could, if it's not on the lease agreement for some reason, or someone's using an old one or something, you could just do a web search for this right here, pull this up, download the PDF, and hand it off to your client. So we'll look at this here one last time. That's it. That is everything you need to have a complete and compliant lease file. Thank you for watching.